Hi, Paul Nashawaty coming to you live from the show floor at Open Source Summit 2026 in Minneapolis. I'm here with Kat from Minimus. How you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
Great to have you on. It's great to be here.
I love being here, and I love talking to y'all. You're always pleasant.
Yeah, we try to be. We try to be. No, what a great event. I mean, the Open Source Summit. This is a great, intimate event. It's much smaller than KubeCon, but it's like much more intimate than conversations. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. There's more people here that are like in positions of authority in a variety of open source projects, whereas at KubeCon, it's mostly specifically cloud native people. But here we've got people from the OpenSSF here, we've got people from FinOps, we've got people from all kinds of Linux Foundation directed funds doing like real serious open source work, and it's really nice to see how other projects outside of my personal scope are operating.
Yeah, I love the practitioner view. It gives you that real world, like how the rubber hits the road. So let's talk about what's Minimus talking about here.
Because it's the Open Source Summit, we're mostly talking about our open source program.
Yep.
So any open source project with an OSI approved license and sufficient project health can apply to get access to Minimus hardened container images for use in their CI pipelines. I'm doing a lot of talking about that at least. Personally, as an open source maintainer myself, I believe that we are often forced to do more with significantly less. We don't get access to the same tooling that like an enterprise proprietary software development team would.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really important for companies that are building these kinds of enterprise security applications also provide them for open source tools, because we're building the thing that all of these paid products are built upon.
Right.
So when you want the foundation to be like as secure as possible, like we have a moral obligation to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that there's, the building blocks, the ground foundation to kind of make things work. I love your messaging. You talk about 99% fewer CVEs, right? But let's talk about the kind of I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but like the mythos, what's happening there.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of fear mongering around mythos, obviously. A lot of think pieces about it killing open source and making open source unreliable or less reliable than proprietary software. So proprietary software relies on security through obscurity because its source code is not all out there. Mythos does not care about that. Proprietary software is every bit as vulnerable to something like Mythos as open source software is. The difference is that open source software is generally more secure because we have more eyeballs on it.
Absolutely.
We have more eyeballs, we have more engineering power, so things can develop much, much faster. Mythos does not change that math at all. It does make proprietary software less secure because they still have the less eyeballs problem. Open source software with appropriate support from the companies relying on it can always get more eyeballs at a moment's notice. So yes, Mythos is a little scary. I get that, but it's not as scary as a lot of the clickbaity think pieces want you to believe. It just means that there's maybe going to be a period of time where open source projects are overwhelmed with the vulnerability reports, and we can get ahead of that by supporting open source projects now with more contributors that eventually turn into more maintainers, and this problem will never exist. And Mythos becomes a net positive because it's making software more secure, but it is not the boogeyman.
Right, absolutely. No, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of conversation around it. I think there's a lot of scare tactics. I like you say clickbait, right? I mean, it's definitely there. What would you advise the audience here if people are like, oh no, the sky's falling. What do I do with this? What would you advise the audience to do?
My answer is different for open source maintainers versus companies. Open source maintainers, we have to calm down. We do have to batten down the hatches a little, but we don't need to be panicking, especially like within the Linux Foundation. Many of us have access to Mythos, or at least our security committees do. So we can stay ahead of it for a period of time. For companies relying on open source software, you have now not just a moral obligation to contribute back to open source, whether that's money or engineering power. We would prefer people to money, honestly, for LF projects usually. You got a moral obligation, and now you also have like a business health obligation to keep the things secure that you are building, right? So give people back, make you don't have to pull a hyperscaler and hire an entire team of people who are dedicated to open source, but dedicate a few hours of your engineering power.
And organizations that will say, hey, we're overworked, our bench is really strained. The reality of it is giving back to open source helps actually mitigate some of the strain or the skill gap issues that they have. So that, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I like contributing to open source is a great way to learn new engineering skills, new
Absolutely.
project management skills, new soft skills too, because we are dealing with a messy group of globally distributed people. That requires good social skills to do effectively. So like there are positives to your org beyond just the security of the tooling you're using to have your engineers go work on Kubernetes or go work on etcd or go work on whatever.
Right.
You know?
And the two things I hear from organizations that they're struggling with is complexity and skill gap issues. And I think if they give back to the open source community by education and learning, those two areas pretty much go away.
They do.
Right? Because you end up learning, your bench learns how to do things that they typically may not know.
Yeah.
And then the complexity piece gets resolved by figuring out new ways of doing things, but trying to figure things out. So I think that's the right approach. All right, let's talk about Minimus.
Sure.
What's going on with Minimus? What's happening here? Like, you have the Minimus side, you have the open source side. I get that.
Yeah.
What else is going on with Minimus?
So it is mostly the open source side here at this event because it's Open Source Summit. But we are partnering with Adara, which is pretty exciting. Adara does runtime security. We do container security, so it's a very like natural partnership.
Sure.
I think so. We're very excited for that one. It'll be good for us, good for Adara, and more importantly, good for all of our users. Ultimately, that's what we care most about.
Stay tuned to that series that we're going to do because we're going to have another episode talking about all of us in there. That'll be great.
Yeah.
But no, I think that relationship is great. The container security piece, the CVE piece. What about anything like the EU CRA that's coming into effect? How is that impacting this?
Oh, geez. So a common thing I've noticed with talking to people about the CRA is that Americans and American companies tend to think that they are unaffected by the CRA.
That's not true. Yeah.
And that's not true.
Right.
Yeah, it's not true at all. The CRA is it's a very complicated and large piece of legislature,
Yes, it is.
and reading it is overwhelming. So I would recommend that even an American company, maybe especially an American company, have its legal team review the actual content of the CRA so that you understand how you're affected. But generally, if you are selling in Europe, you're required to comply with the CRA. And I don't think any of us is comfortable saying, well, I just won't sell in Europe then.
Yeah, well, organizations that have applications that interact not just in Europe but globally are impacted by the CRA as well. So there's definitely that, and that's still evolving and changing. So stay tuned on that one.
Yeah.
But okay, so top 3 things. What would you let the audience know? Top 3 things to take away from this event.
Contribute back to open source for your own business health and for the community at large. Mythos is not that scary, but it does require that we all make some changes. And one of those is contributing back to open source. And the CRA does affect you. I don't think we've had an open source summit or a security conference where there haven't been like 3 or 4 talks about the CRA for years because people still don't get it. But it is going into effect now. So it's time to start making sure you're compliant.
Absolutely. Kat, always a great time to talk to you. Thank you for your insights.
Too.
And thank you for watching. Paul Nashawaty coming to you live from Open Source Summit 2026.